security updates. In this nugget, we take a look at security updates, and it's probably never been more important than it is now because you've got to really head off those latest viruses and worms and things like that. But you first have to know if your systems are vulnerable, and you can use the Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer, or MBSA, to check that out, not only for the latest patches, but also for other security weaknesses. And you can run this locally or remotely, and I'll show you what the various requirements are to run it remotely. Then you can use the basic GUI, which is probably the easiest way to do it, but you might also want to use the command line interface in order to use various scripts, or to get more control over the way MBSA runs. And then if you don't have the patches and updates you need, you can use SUS instead, or Software Update Services. I'll show you how to install and configure that, and there are several things to look out for there, as well as how to implement the appropriate group policy. There are 4 basic policies in place you'll need to know about, and you do need to enable them appropriately, or otherwise your updates won't get deployed. And we'll talk to you a little bit also about the design of Software Update Services. You know, several weeks ago, the Sasser virus came out, at least at the time of this recording, it was several weeks ago. And a lot of people panicked, a lot of people got infected, a lot of people's networks were really vulnerable to that virus. And I know somebody, in fact, I can't remember how long she said she stayed up. I think she said she had to stay up 2 full days, 2 days straight, trying to fix all the remnants of the Sasser virus and all of the destruction that it had caused. Well, as with the Sasser virus and many other viruses and worms and things like that that have come out, Microsoft actually has patches that they've created weeks or even months in advance to the time that those viruses get loose. The problem is a lot of administrators aren't aware of them. They aren't aware that their machines are weak in certain respects or are not patched. And even if they are not patched, they don't really have a method for deploying patches and fixes in an efficient way where they don't have to visit each individual machine. Because on a home machine, for example, of course, you just go to Microsoft's Windows Update site, you scan your machine, you say, oh, I guess I need to download a few of these patches and that. So then you'll just download them, install them, and you're pretty much done. But you can't do that on hundreds or thousands of machines across a corporate network. But what you can do is to use Microsoft's Baseline Security Analyzer. Now, this is actually a tool that has been converted from strictly a CLI, which is a command line interface, or CLI, from a command line interface version, which was developed by Shavlik Technologies. And now they've evolved it into this Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer, which is a GUI version. It uses XML, and you can see right here, really, it's pretty much the same kind of an interface that you'd see if you go to the Windows Update site. Now, the purpose of this tool is not to patch your systems. That's just a very clear thing that you want to understand right from the beginning. This will not apply any patches or service packs or make any changes to any machine. All this does is it sees where the machine might be weak. It'll identify if there are patches that should be installed but aren't. It also identifies whether a patch version is old and needs to be updated. It'll identify whether you have other vulnerabilities not related to patches, such as maybe you've got weak passwords, or maybe you've got too many administrators on a machine, that kind of thing. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer, which you can download, by the way, from Microsoft's website. And if I just go www.microsoft.com, and you can see my history there, /MBSA, just click on that. Quick and easy way to get to this page. It redirects you right here. And then this will give you a download link to download Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer closer down here to the bottom. Now, it's a pretty simple installation. It's just double-click on the file that you download. It's next, finish, and you're pretty much done. So I've gone ahead and done that already. And then what I can do with this is to go ahead and scan a computer. Notice that you can only scan machines that are NT 4.0 or later. That's only on NT-based operating systems. Now, here I can also scan just locally. So I'm going to scan my local computer here. And doing this, I'm just going to scan the local machine, and it has the name of the computer right in there. I'll go ahead and leave that in there. I can also enter an IP address if I like. It's going to generate security report name, and you can see the variables for this here, which are defined down underneath here. So it's going to generate a name for this. This will be in XML format, and then I can specify what I wanted to check against. I'm not running SQL, so I don't need to check that, but if I were, certainly I would leave that selected, and I'll just leave all the rest of these selected. Also, we're going to look at SUS later, where we're Software Update Services. But if I have a SUS server in my corporate network, I can select this checkbox, enter in the HTTP location of that SUS server, and it will check this local machine, or whichever machine I'm scanning, against the list of approved updates on the SUS server. Now here I'm going to go ahead and start the scan, and what it's going to do is it's going to download the security update information from Microsoft. It's actually downloaded it already from a previous time that I ran this, but it downloads about a 1.7 megabyte file, and as long as it's going ahead and running a scan, I'll show you where that file is. Just go under Program Files, Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer, and it's a file here. It's an XML file. In fact, let me just sort according to type here so I can find it a little bit easier. It's an XML file, and there it is, mssecure.xml. You can open this up in Notepad or double-click it to open it up in Internet Explorer if you like. And having opened it up, you really don't do anything with it. In fact, you should not edit this file because it's signed by Microsoft, and you make any changes to it, it'll affect the signature checking, and then it will not be able to run in the Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer. But if you want to, you can just look through this as if you want to look at all the individual details of everything that it does. So anyway, what it's doing is it's going to go ahead and take that file, and it's going to scan it against this machine, and it's going to see how it stacks up against what the latest security updates are that are stated in that file. Also, that file is going to identify things such as what a weakness is, whether a weak password is involved, and all that kind of thing. And that's gone ahead and finished, which took, probably a couple of minutes. I just didn't record the whole time. I kind of paused so you wouldn't have to sit here and just tap your fingers and wait for it. In any case, it gives you some rudimentary information at the beginning. I did also, by the way, deliberately involve some weaknesses here so we'd have something to look at. So let's go ahead and take a look at the kind of things that are here. Some things are just information. They're not really warnings or problems. It's just telling us that a couple of security updates couldn't be confirmed. I can look at the result details, and it'll tell me why they weren't able to confirm those details, and then it gives me a knowledge-based article right here that I've highlighted that you can go ahead and take a look at. So you could go ahead and look at that information. Other things, it tells me that my Microsoft security updates are up to date. Now, previous versions of the Baseline Security Analyzer did not have this capability, so that's kind of handy to have now because it'll keep track of those Office updates as well. Here it identifies I've got more than 2 administrators on the computer. That's not really necessarily a problem. It just wants to notify me of that. It could be an issue because what if I know that I've only got 2 administrators on this machine? Well, if it says I've got more than 2, then it could be that someone's exploited this machine, has added an administrator account for use as a backdoor, and they can come back and use that administrator account at some later point in time. So it's just something I might want to know about, whether or not I have also password expiration going on. Now, I have a few accounts that don't have expired passwords because they're service accounts, and of course, service accounts should not expire because then your service stops working. So that's the reason why that is. So there's a few other things. My internet connection firewall is disabled, which is fine for me on this machine because I'm behind a hardware firewall anyway. And then we see all the other kinds of things it'll check through, and I've really got pretty well updated. I don't think it's going to find any updates that I need to apply to this machine because I've already patched it with the current versions because I don't want to get any viruses or any worms or anything like that. This does tell me here's the red X will tell you when you do have a problem. In this case, I weakened the enhanced security configuration that's installed by default with Windows Server 2003. That's because I need to show you certain web pages from time to time in this series, and I had to do that in order to show you those web pages. Otherwise, this would not allow you to browse web pages in the conventional manner that we're used to. So anyway, that's pretty much it. If you want to also, you can scan a remote computer as well, and let's go ahead and take a look at that. Now, to run it remotely, I'm going to go to another machine in a different domain. My server is called .NET here, and I'm going to scan a remote machine. I could do it by IP address or by name. I'm just going to do it by IP address in this case. And I've removed IIS and SQL because this happens to be a Windows XP computer, and I don't have those installed on it. So I can also, again, use a sus server if I want. I'm not going to do that in this case. I'm just going to scan it against the XML file that I've already downloaded, and it's going to go ahead and scan that remotely. Now, while it's doing that, let me talk to you a little bit about what you need to have as requirements before you're capable of doing a remote scan. So in order to run MBSA remotely, I have to have the following ports open, and this is probably not going to be too much of an issue behind a firewall anyway. But I'll have to have TCP 139, UDP 137, and 138. These all relate to NetBIOS ports. You do not want to open those ports up on an internet router, because if you do, you're going to subject yourself to all kinds of security weaknesses because there's inherent weaknesses within NetBIOS and within those ports. And if nothing else, people out there on the internet, just try this. Just put your personal computer, you don't want to do that, but put some computer that you don't mind if it gets wasted out there on the internet publicly, just like on a cable modem connection or something like that. And within minutes, you're probably going to get a whole bunch of NetSend messages advertising that you should go, buy blue pills and all other kind of stuff. Anyway, so don't do that because that's kind of another version of spam, if you will, through the NetSend messages that people send out on the internet. Then the port 445 is going to be used for LDAP, and the purpose for that is because you need to be an administrator on the machine that you're trying to scan, and it needs to have this port open so that it can check your credentials against a domain controller. Then also in terms of the scanner itself, That is the machine that is doing the scanning. Then you need to be running Windows 2000 or greater. You need to have the workstation service and client for Microsoft Networks running. And that's because it's going to be the workstation and the client for whichever machine you're scanning. And that would be the scanned machine, or the scannee, if you want to call it that. The scanned machines that you're going to scan can be NT 4.0 or greater. They must be running Internet Explorer version 5.01 or greater. They will be having the server service running, and they also have to have the remote registry service running, and that's because the remote scan will look into the registry to check for update characteristics. Then you need to have file and printer sharing running as well, or actually installed, I guess. And again, you have to be the local administrator on that remote machine. Now, another thing to be aware of here is that if you go to the Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer help file, then you'll be able to see how you can start this Baseline Security Analyzer in the GUI version from a command line. And that'll be by typing MBSA from a command line and then following it with whatever command line options you want, which appear in the help file here. You can specify the name of a specific computer, a particular IP address, or a range of IP addresses, and so forth. And this might be more useful if you want to do a regularly scheduled script or something like that, so that you can then also have it save the file, and you can specify parameters in this to save the file name to however you want it to be saved. And then maybe you might want to save them all to a central location or something like that, and then go back through them and check all the files out. Now, another thing you could do would be to run the HFNetCheck version, and if we do this, we'll see that's the HFNetCheck. This is what Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer evolved from, because this was the strictly command line interface version, which you can still run right now, even though you've already been using Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer. Now, by using this tool, we'll keep everything in the CLI, and we will not be using a GUI at all with this one. And again, this one's probably going to actually be better in terms of scripting, because it will not involve an interface that will pop up on any machines. And this one will also show you the various options that you can use. But rather than go through each one of these various switches, of which there's quite a few there, we'll just go ahead and do maybe an example or two from the command line so that we can see what kind of things you can do from using HFNetCheck from a command line. Now then, if you want to use the Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer from a command line, you'll just enter in from a command line, and I've put it in a batch file actually here. Where'd it go? I'll put it in actually in a batch file here. And this batch file, if I right-click on it and choose Edit, will give you the kind of syntax you might want to use. For example, first of all, I'm changing to the correct directory, and that will, you can also enter in a path statement if one's not entered automatically for you when you install the program. It will